world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Sunday, April 19th, as I am recording this. Now, I thought I'd be recording this a little earlier in the day than I actually got to it, but that is fine. Coming up on Monday, going to do a TikTok Live. Hope to catch you guys all there. That will be Tuesday's podcast. Still trying to get back ahead to where I have the podcasts up earlier in the day, but that's neither here nor there. I thank everybody for taking the time to actually watch and listen. Just a reminder that the video version is now also available over on Spotify. Trying to do a better job at keeping up on Spotify there, and trying to keep that more current. I would wish there was a better way for me to do it automatically, but I haven't figured that out yet. Not like how I have everything else set up for everywhere else. So we got a lot to talk about. We got some major news stories that did break, and I want to start with, I got a small list here going. This story coming out that says that you may remember, about a week and a half ago, I think it was now, there was that big rescue of the American airman who was shot down in Iran. And a lot of things about that rescue did not make sense. When we were looking at it, apparently there were some things in there that didn't add up. Supposedly the airman was injured. Some reporting had said seriously injured. And then, according to some reports, had gotten himself in one night over 100 miles away and up a mountain face. That it just didn't all add up. And when they were talking about it, you may remember that General Kane, General Dan Kane. I keep wanting to call him Dean Kane, but that's the actor. Anyway, General Dan Kane, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, wanted to keep the number of people involved in the rescue mission secret, but Donald Trump comes out, oh yeah, I can keep it a secret, but it was hundreds, wasn't it? And just couldn't keep it secret. Well, now there is new reporting that they tossed Donald Trump out of the Situation Room. They are saying that the top aides and advisors to the President of the United States was shut out from discussions amid concerns about his temperament. This is coming from MSN. Trump, who made a disturbing comment on stage that silenced. That's a link to another article. Never mind there. But he was denied access to the command center while a dangerous mission was underway to rescue an American pilot from Iran. Top administration officials believed his volatility could compromise the operation following the downing of a U.S. aircraft by Iranian forces earlier this month. Trump allegedly spent hours yelling at staff in the West Wing after being haunted by memories of the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis. Reportedly, Donald Trump said last month, if you look at what happened with Jimmy Carter, it cost them the election. What a mess. So apparently, Donald Trump was very worried about what was going on After learning that 2 airmen were unaccounted for, Trump screamed at aides for hours, the Wall Street Journal reported. The president's top advisors and administration I can't talk today. Administration officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, joined Situation Room's briefings over the following 24 hours to monitor developments. A senior official confirmed that while Trump wasn't present in the meeting, he received updates at meaningful moments via telephone, and aides kicked the president out of the room as they got minute-by-minute updates because they believed his impatience wouldn't be helpful. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt added that Trump had remained a steady leader our country needs and said President Trump campaigned proudly on his promise to deny the Iranian regime ability to develop a nuclear weapon, which is what this noble operation accomplishes. After a desperate bid to save the second airman, the president received word on the evening of April 4 that he had been successfully extracted by U.S. forces during the rescue operation. Senior administration official revealed the mission succeeded thanks to crucial intelligence from the CIA, which alerted both the Pentagon and White House to his whereabouts. So what we are hearing is J.D. Vance and Donald Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, kept the president out of the Situation Room. If this had been Joe Biden and we had heard about this, Republicans would still be crowing about it a year and a half into his successor's term. This is a very scary thought when you think about it. You have the sitting president of the United States being deemed not mentally capable enough and not emotionally stable enough by his own administration to end up keeping him in the loop, right? They had to move him. They removed him from the Situation Room, said, we'll give you updates, it's fine. And then they probably only gave him the highlights. Now they said he was updated as it needed and he was still in control. But how much control was he really in if he wasn't in the room where it happened? And if the people around him were the actual people making those decisions? Like I said, if this was Joe Biden, Republicans would have ran with it forever and a day. Joe Biden stuttered a little bit, and we heard about it for 4 years as to how unintelligent he was. Things like that. This whole thing is insane to think about when you think about Donald Trump being the president of the United States. I mean, the fact that he's the president at all is terrifying. We elected a moron. And now it's pretty evident, at least to me, that the people around him even know that he is a moron. And they are not really willing to let him make these decisions. Now, this could lead to calls for him being removed. Let's see. Trying to remember. Read an article the other day talking about if it was in a secret ballot that there are enough votes in Congress to remove Donald Trump. But it would have to be a secret ballot. They don't want to put their name on it publicly. Well, the thing with that is, as they are looking toward a secret ballot, or if they are looking toward removing him, that tells me that they're getting close to needing to and being willing to remove Donald Trump. And as you hear things like, well, he was removed from the Situation Room, it gives credence and it gives abilities to, or it makes you think about the chances that they do remove him, right? Okay. If you have a president who is incapable of being in that Situation Room and handling all of those things, that is one of the reasons why they would want to consider the 25th Amendment. Now, I talked about it a while back. I'm trying to remember what day I talked about that. Looks like it was earlier this week about there being a long shot committee potentially being formed, a commission to look at um, whether or not Donald Trump is fit to be president of the United States, whether or not the 25th Amendment should be used. And the thing with that is if this commission does get approved, and I don't think it will, I don't know if it gets out of Congress. However, if it gets out of Congress, the thing with that is there is a chance that Donald Trump would sign this law creating this commission, if for no other reason than to try to prove his own mental stability. Donald Trump is all about his image and his uh, input and what people think about him and all of these things. So what would he try to accomplish there? Well, if he tries to show that he is mentally stable, mentally competent, etc., then he may sign off on creating a commission to prove that, right? Now, this commission, if it is formed, would look at Donald Trump's psychiatric ability, his mental records, his health records, etc., and they would create a final report. And this would take months. And Donald Trump may not even have that much time left, realistically. He may not. But this would be something that uh, they want to do just to end up trying to put some pressure on him, right? Now, I don't know which way that commission is going to go. But if we're already hearing that the Republicans are willing in a secret ballot to remove him, they may be willing to publicly at least vote for a commission to look at his mental health and his mental fitness, especially after reports like I was just talking about, where he was kicked out of the Situation Room. Now, why would they be willing to vote for that publicly? Because they can spin that. Okay. And how can they spin it? Well, they can go to their voters and they can say, well, yeah, I only voted to create the commission to prove the Democrats wrong once and for all, right? That's their big hook. They can make it sound like the whole thing is nothing but uh, a ploy to make it so that the Democrats look dumb and foolish and everything. They don't have to tell the voters the truth being that they were trying to actively um, remove Donald Trump, or that they actually believe that Donald Trump is unfit for the presidency or anything. They don't have to prove any of that. All they have to do is prove to the voters that they were trying to make the Democrats look bad, and suddenly, here we are. The Democrats look bad in their mind. I don't think it'll work. And you have Donald Trump, who might actually sign this thing into law, trying to think that he will, pass everything. He's already been given the Montreal Cognitive Assessment numerous times, and I've talked about it before. And I've got it pulled up here. Uh, Here are just a few examples of what's on that assessment. And he always says he passes it with flying colors. But he says certain things about it and then makes it sound like he's the only one who could ever sign it or he could ever pass it. Now, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, some of the things that Donald Trump says are very difficult that involve mathematical equations. The only math on this entire assessment that I see is they give you a starting number. I've seen 100, I've seen 50, I've seen 60, I've seen 40, whatever that number is. They give you a starting number and they tell you to subtract 7. And how many times do you get it right? Okay, that's the only math. There are other things like they read a list of letters and you're supposed to tap your hand on the table every time you hear the letter A. It's just, do you recognize it and can you Can you put a movement with recognizing a letter? Can you name a couple animals? Can you remember 5 words for 5 minutes? It's not hard if you are in your right mind. Now, he wouldn't have taken this test numerous times if they weren't concerned about his mental health and his mental state. But see, when it comes to all of that, he has the uh, problem of also being a narcissist. So when they tell him afterward that, of course, he passed it, his brain fills in the gaps and he comes up with this fantastic story that nobody else could ever pass it. And they would have told him that he passed it even if he got nothing right in that exam for 2 reasons. One, you have somebody who is known to have one hell of a temper, uh, is bound to, or he's often been reported as throwing ketchup packets and other things against the wall and having major outbursts. Also, from what I know from my own experiences and from hearing stories of people I know who have worked in healthcare, older people who are suffering from dementia uh, are sometimes more prone to fits and outbursts of physical violence. So maybe because they were afraid of some kind of physical violence, they chose to instead not tell him. And they would end up, just telling him he did great, patting him on the back, and letting him believe it. And the people around him are actually making these decisions, like I was talking about where this started with the Situation Room. The fact that he was removed from the Situation Room should have all Republicans very nervous. This is a story that Democrats can use to paint all Republicans in a very negative light in the upcoming midterm campaigns. Uh, with that, because you have the ability to say, well, look, they're not even allowing Donald Trump in the room to make some of these major decisions, and the Republicans aren't doing their job. They are not uh, going out and trying to hold him accountable. They are not trying to uh, make it so that he is um, removed from office, anything like that. They're just letting him continue, knowing that he has been ousted from the Situation Room in the past. And now that this reporting is out there, it also changes how we are perceived on the global stage. When Iran goes to make other decisions, they're going to be questioning whether or not Donald Trump is in command of his faculties, whether or not Donald Trump is even in the Situation Room or even being briefed on how things are going. And when other countries are looking at what they are willing to do, um, that they are going to have to look at it and go, well, do we have, uh, are we dealing with Donald Trump or are we actually dealing with people acting just in Donald Trump's name? It is a very weird situation for us to be in. Again, if this was a Democrat, the Republicans would never let us hear the end of it. But the other side of it is, if it was a Democrat, the Democrats would have already started the process. The Democrats would have already initiated maybe impeachment proceedings. Maybe they would, if this was actually Joe Biden, and let's say in a weird alternate history world where Joe Biden never dropped out of the race and he ran and he won in 2024. And I think he could have won in 2024, but that's neither here nor there. But let's just say he did. And something like this came up with Joe Biden. We're about the same point in his presidency. And Joe Biden was removed from the Situation Room because they did not think he was mentally fit to be there and that his emotional outbursts were going to jeopardize the mission, things like that. Democrats in Congress would already be in talks with Vice President Kamala Harris if that was the case to remove Joe Biden. But see, Joe Biden isn't president, Donald Trump is. And we're not hearing that they are talking to J.D. Vance about removing Donald Trump. They're letting things go. And I think they are doing that up into the point when there is another, till after they are past this election, I should say, because that's their best opportunity to move on Donald Trump. They're worried about the midterm elections. They're worried about the primaries that we are in the middle of. And they are worried that they are going to end up getting blown out in those midterms. I've been talking about it before. I think the House and the Senate, well, the House is definitely going to flip, in my opinion. We only need a few seats, and I think that will happen. Then after it flips, I think we have to worry about flipping the Senate. The Senate could flip, and I think Republicans are very worried about that. And they know if they end up pushing back too hard against uh, Donald Trump, that they risk alienating that 30-ish% of the MAGA voting base who will only vote for Donald Trump. And that's where they are running that risk. So I think they are waiting until either closer to the midterms after those primaries happen. So that way Donald Trump does not come out and endorse a primary challenge or things like that. Or they are going to wait until after the midterms itself. And maybe they are hoping that the Big Mac gets Donald Trump between here and there. I mean, Donald Trump himself is not in good shape. He comes out and says things that are just bizarre. Um, he was talking about over the weekend. I think it was Thursday. He was in West Virginia. No, he was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and he was at a rally, and they were talking about. He was trying to rally up support, talking about his no tax on tips and things like that. And that he comes out and he says, "Oh, I love my senior citizens. My senior citizens, they're not paying any tax on overtime or tax on Social Security, rather. They're doing better. I love my senior citizens. I'm not a senior, but I love my senior citizens." Well, Donald Trump is 79. If he's not a senior citizen, what is he? Well, in Donald Trump's mind, he's in his 30s. He can't accept the fact that he is old. Remember during 2024 when he was in getting arraigned for one of his criminal cases, um, he was asked his age by a judge, and Donald Trump couldn't admit that he was 77. Now, I don't know if it was because he struggled with the word 77 or if he just didn't want to say his full age, but he said he is 77. And maybe because of some of the other things we've seen him not know, maybe he couldn't remember the word for 77. Maybe, but he said he was 7'7". And he still talks and thinks like that he is, in his 30s or 40s. Now, I kind of get that in some ways. When I think of myself, I imagine myself back to what I looked like in my early 20s and late teens. But I also know the reality is that's not what I look like. That is not who I am. And I know people do not see me that way. Um, it's a big difference. But see, Donald Trump isn't that way. So he can't even admit he's a senior citizen. In fact, he comes out and he says at this meeting, I think I talked about it on yesterday's podcast. He says, well, he's talking about the corner store. And they were talking about saving tax, no tax on tips and stuff was going to save money for people working the corner store. And he says, "What's a corner store?" "Oh, I know what a corner store is, but I've never heard that term. Who the hell wrote this?" Well, he's in the middle of a speech. He's reading prepared remarks, and he can't even remember what a corner store is. This is ridiculous. It's not a new term. Remember back during the campaign, Donald Trump acted like he had invented the word groceries, that nobody used that term anymore. Jesus Christ. That's a daily term for a lot of people, especially now that groceries are getting more expensive and they're only going to continue to go up. Now, speaking of prices going up, coming up this week, someday, I'm not sure what day this week it is, I believe, there is going to be the opening of the refund portal for the tariff money. Now, Donald Trump's tariffs were deemed unconstitutional. So he is going to have to refund all of that money. But I heard something like it's only going to be for 170 some billion dollars. And we had heard many, many numbers that were floated as to how much we had raked in. I heard one number saying 130 million. Donald Trump himself had put the number into the multiple trillions. He was always throwing out a new large number to make it sound important. Even 170 billion is a lot of money. And I think one of the reasons why we have trouble getting through to the MAGA base when it comes to things like that, people are bad with math. And I see it all the time. Like, for example, and I see people on the left do this too. It's not just people on the right. With these large numbers, you have Elon Musk, who has about $600 billion, something like that. And there's about 330 million people in the country. Well, I've seen numerous people try to say that Musk could give everybody $1 billion or $1 million and still have money left over, and that's not how the math works. When you take out all of the common zeros and you do the math down, he could give everybody about $2,000, something like that. Still a lot of money and would help a lot of people, and he would still be left with a considerable sum afterward. But it's a far cry from giving everybody millions. And it's because when you start writing it out, I think that's one of the problems when we start talking about how much money we are actually dealing with. Like Donald Trump wants to uh, increase the defense budget by $500 billion. When you write 500 billion as a 500 with a billion behind it, um, people forget how big and how many zeros that is compared to writing it out, which would be 500 with what would that be? Nine more zeros behind the 500. That makes that number a little easier to understand for some people. Some people do have problems with that shorthand and visualizing that number. So these tariffs are going to be refunded, but or starting to be refunded sometime this week. I'm not sure what day that portal opens, um, and we'll see if it turns into a big debacle. Now, Donald Trump, of course, thinks his tariffs are still legal. He's still threatening tariffs because he's going to try to find another way to make them happen and all of this. It was a failed economic policy, completely and totally failed. He did not um, make it a success with all of it. It caused prices to go up. And how these refunds are going to work, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be, like I said, way back before they ever were declared unconstitutional, is that these companies are going to get the refunds because it sounds like you have to have actually paid them directly to the government in order to get the refund. Okay. So if it is a refund back to, say, Walmart, well, Walmart's not going to lower their prices. They might, but they're not going to take this money and lower their prices with it. No, what they're going to do is they're going to give their CEOs, their top board members, big bonuses, put it on the bottom line, call it profits, and walk away, leaving us holding the bag. Donald Trump once again fucked over the American people. It is very, very telling about where Donald Trump's loyalties lie now. He thought he could get away with doing this. And I don't know why he thought tariffs were such a good idea. He had several advisors who told them they were a good idea and they would make the country all this money. Um, but it didn't end up doing that. And if you look at history, tariffs have done nothing but fail repeatedly. They were one of the causes that actually made the Great Depression worse after the stock market crash. They tried to put a whole bunch of tariffs on foreign made products to make people buy American and try to salvage the American markets. But all it did was raise prices everywhere on both sets of goods and make things even less affordable for anybody. It's amazing that we had to learn this lesson a second time. Now, there's reporting out, switching to the Iran war here, there is reporting out that the reason Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz a second time was because of the naval blockade that President Trump has left in place. They're not happy. Well, now we are hearing that there was a ship headed for Iran that was seized. That they seized a ship. Let's see if I can find it here. I had it pulled up, but I don't know where the link went. I am one of the people you joke about all the time about having 80,000 tabs open. Yeah, that's a lot of times it's me because I pull something up looking for a news story. And um, there it is. Let's see. So, nope, lost it. That's not it. That's not the article. That's talking about the Venezuelan ship. Here it is. All right. U.S. attacks Iranian cargo ship while preparing for new rounds of talks. Um, President Trump said a Navy destroyer attacked and seized an Iranian flagged vessel in the Gulf of Oman. Uh, Apparently, a destroyer in the Arabian Sea warned an Iranian flagged cargo ship to stop over a 6-hour period numerous times. Um, and then they ended up uh, seizing it. And there's some reporting that they fired on the ship's engine room, disabling the vessel, which allowed helicopter-borne Marines to board and seize it, U.S. Central Command said in a statement. This comes from the New York Times. When the crew of the Tuska, the Iranian ship, ignored the American warnings, the destroyer fired its gun into the ship's engine room, Central Command said on Sunday. Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit were conducting a search of the vessel that is now in American custody. Now, we don't know what was on that ship as of yet, but it's effectively high seas piracy at this point. And this isn't the first time this has happened. I mentioned when thought I was pulling up an article about this seizure. Instead, it was talking about that Venezuelan oil tanker that the government had seized. When Donald Trump is gone, and he will be gone eventually, and I know a lot of people are worried that because of the bunker being built under the old East Wing, and what potentially could be that new ballroom. And I'm still not sure that the ballroom is going to be built. That may end up getting rebuilt as the East Wing, especially if it's not finished before the Democrats take back over in 29. That the next Democratic president is going to have a lot to fix on our relations with foreign countries. But supposedly this ship has now been seized, its cargo seized, etc. And that's effectively high seas piracy. That's not a way to help negotiations. Now, they said they were going to send J.D. Vance and more diplomats back, I believe they're going to Islamabad in Pakistan. And Trump had said, well, yeah, um, if there's another round of talks and it looks like there's going to be a deal, yeah, I'll go to Islamabad. Well, the thing with that is, if there are more talks in Islamabad, and Donald Trump goes, I looked it up on yesterday's podcast, I believe. He doesn't have to worry about International Criminal Court in extradition. He doesn't have to worry about getting um, sent to Iran or anything like that. So, yeah, he may go, but his presence there may ultimately end up hurting everything versus helping. I mean, what deals has Donald Trump actually accomplished this term? Now, uh, MAGAs and Republicans will point to all of the supposed trade deals that Donald Trump worked out, except those deals, we don't hear anything from the other side saying that, yeah, they agreed. Their own media in their countries are saying, yeah, no deal actually took place, or we didn't agree to all of that, or anything like that. And even the ones that we did hear a little bit about from their own countries saying that they were going to try to come up with a deal, those people are saying, well, now that the tariffs were deemed illegal, which was the main threat you used to get them to the table to agree to those deals, um, they want to renegotiate. So, how good of a deal maker is Donald Trump actually? Does he make any deals at all, or is he completely and totally ridiculous? And I think he's ridiculous. I mean, he likes to think he is this massive deal maker, but even the deals he has made in his first term, look at the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement that he now says is the worst deal ever, and a deal that he has broken, which was his revised version of NAFTA, which effectively was just NAFTA with a few more steps and things like that. And what does he get out of it? Nothing. He got nothing new out of it. And now he says, well, um, it's the worst deal ever. Whoever thought of it was an idiot. It needs to be revised. But it was his deal. It was his deal the whole time. Donald Trump is not this master deal maker that he likes everyone to think he is. He is what's the word I want to look what am I trying to say? He is a showman at best, right? It's all about not necessarily the art of the deal, but it's the art of making it look like there is a deal or that there is something to be gained here. Now we are coming up close to the end of that 2 week ceasefire. We will see what he does on that. He has said before that he doesn't plan on extending that ceasefire. But knowing Donald Trump, he will probably chicken out and he'll probably back down and he will, especially if Iran is showing the upper hand. So we will see what he does with that. Now, uh, I had another story here. Oh, right. There is reporting out now that Donald Trump wants to award himself the Congressional Medal of Honor. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, first of all, the Congressional Medal of Honor isn't some random prize. Yes, the uh, Congressional Medal of Honor is an honor that the president can give out, but no president has ever awarded it to themselves. Now, uh, why does he think he deserves it? Well, he thinks he deserves it because during the uh, during his first term, he flew into Iraq, uh, onto a runway with no lights on it at night, I believe. And because he was in the plane, he thinks he deserves it because it was so brave. This is the uh, the man who got out of the army in Vietnam 5 different times with bone spurs. Now, I'm just pulled this up to give you an idea. I picked one person, one recipient at random. Recipient John Baca. Um, Medal of Honor action date February 10th, 1970, during the Korean War. Okay. He received it in 71, presented by Richard Nixon. Let's see. I'm just going to compare the two stories and see if this meets what Donald Trump claims to have gone through, if that was such a brave act or not. Citation: for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Spec 4 Baca Company D distinguished himself while serving on a recoilless rifle team during a night ambush mission. A platoon for his company was sent to investigate the detonation of an automatic ambush device forward of his unit's main position and soon came under intense enemy fire from concealed position along the trail. Hearing the heavy firing from the platoon position and realizing that his recoilless rifle team could assist members of the besieged patrol, Spec 4 Baca led his team through the hail of enemy fire to a firing position within the patrol's defensive perimeter. As they prepared to engage the enemy, a fragmentation grenade was thrown into the midst of the patrol. Fully aware of the danger to his comrades, Spec 4 Baca unhesitatingly and with complete disregard for his own safety covered the grenade with his steel helmet and fell on it as the grenade exploded, thereby absorbing the lethal fragments and concussion with his body. His gallant action and total disregard for his personal well-being directly saved 8 men from certain and serious injury or death. The extraordinary courage and selflessness displayed by Spec 4 Baca at the risk of his life are in the highest tradition of military service and reflect great credit to him, his unit, and the U.S. Army. Now, that comes from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society.org. Does that compare to Donald Trump at all? He was on a plane that was landing on a runway, not under fire, just at night, maybe without lights. But see, to Donald Trump, it compares because he was scared. He'll never admit that he was scared, but he must have been if he wants to think this is such a heroic thing that it deserves it. But see, it's also part of the fact that he wants to have it. He's all about giving himself accolades and medals and things like that. So I just looked it up because I was curious. Uh, there's only one president that has ever earned the Congressional Medal of Honor. That is Teddy Roosevelt. And he earned that well before his time as president. But see, Donald Trump doesn't care about any of that. He only cares about giving himself the Medal of Honor because it would be something most people don't have. He can brag about it. Same thing with the Nobel Peace Prize, and same thing about some of these other things that we hear about. You know, the Republican National Committee created their own Trump America First Prize or whatever it was. That once he is gone, we're not going to hear again. And you heard about FIFA creating their version of a peace prize that we will probably never hear of again unless they give it next year. Or I guess it would be this year because they gave it to him last year. But the next time it comes up, if they give it to Donald Trump again. You see, Donald Trump is all about giving himself medals, honors, accolades. things that he can point to about why he is better than other people. Donald Trump is ridiculous, and we can see it. And some Republicans can see it, but most don't want to, because to do so they would have to admit that this man was a con man, and they don't want to do that. Now, if Donald Trump were to give himself the Medal of Honor, it would cheapen the medal for anybody who has received it before or after. Um, and I don't know what kind of uh, thing they could do to change it, right? Like, I don't know if they could rescind it down the road and take it back, or if it's once it's awarded, if it is permanent. Um, no, I just looked it up. So it is. Uh, it can be rescinded in certain circumstances. In fact, it's been done 900 over 900 times overall, but usually because it was uh, given for non-combat actions due to clerical errors. Um, and this says like the 27th Marine Voluntary Infantry Unit, which received medals in mass for enlistment extensions, which it sounds like that was just a clerical error. Um, And it also says here, just in the brief thing I found, it says cases where post award conduct or status calls into question the legitimacy of the award, unlike civilian honors. Well, that's in the UK, but it says it's which well the UK they can be rescinded for criminal or disreputable behavior. Um, it's primarily rescinded for historical or procedural reasons other than post award misconduct. So it could be taken back, and they may have to look at that post Donald Trump if he were to try to do this. But hopefully, the adults in the room can talk him out of it and try to see what they can do to prevent him from doing such a thing, right? Um, Donald Trump should never be allowed to give himself that kind of a medal. He would cheapen it for anybody else who has earned it. I read just one example, and there are thousands of examples of things that are way more heroic than anything Donald Trump has ever done. In fact, there is a chance, because we'll never know who had to go in his place, that one of the recipients, maybe five recipients of the Medal of Honor, were people who only ended up in Vietnam because Donald Trump found a way out. He got bone spurs. Okay. He claimed bone spurs and got out of being drafted 5 separate times. He never went. He never served. And I mean, I don't think he would have lasted in the military to begin with. His personality, which hasn't, I mean, it's gotten worse over the years, but it hasn't really changed. He's always viewed himself as the smartest person in the room, um, and everything else. So he wouldn't really take orders from anybody. I just don't think he would have survived in the military. But that's a discussion for maybe another day. This whole thing with him talking about trying to give himself the Medal of Honor is very disrespectful to the military, to the people who have actually earned it. And when it comes to Donald Trump, it's completely and totally not surprising because he doesn't give a shit about anybody not named Donald Trump. All right, one of the last things I want to talk about is coming up on Tuesday. We have a special election. And this special election is in Virginia. I don't know if there are other primary contests on Tuesday. I will have to look into that and maybe cover that in tomorrow's podcast. If there are any uh, major contests. But the big thing is in Virginia, there is a redistricting effort underway. If you live in Virginia, I encourage you to get out and vote. Now, this redistricting effort, unlike what Texas and North Carolina, Missouri, and a few other Republican led states are doing, it's not about getting rid of uh, Republican seats just because they can. They are actually putting it to the voter. And the voter is going to be the one to decide if they want to actually go through and redistrict or not. And if they do, right now it is a 6-5 split, 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans in Virginia. After the redistricting, it could be 10-1. Now, of course, it could come back and blow up in their face. And the Democrats could lose this position. I mean, one, it could get shot down at the polls. I don't think it will, but there has been heavy push from Republicans trying to get voters out to prevent this from happening. And two, um, if it dilutes their voting pool, it may not matter. Now we will have to see. Obviously, we won't know the actual results of this until after November. The other thing is, it's now going to probably, if it does pass, it would probably change the redistricting for who's running and where for this election. So by changing those districts, it could actually confuse some people. So if you are in Virginia, make sure you are paying attention to who is running. If this does pass, if you get out and vote, I encourage you to go vote. Uh, if you are in favor of it, if you are against it, either way, um, I can see its benefits trying to offset what some of the Republicans are trying to do in other states where they are trying to rig the vote and rig the midterms. I just don't think that even the Republican efforts to redistrict are going to be enough to save the House of Representatives for the Republicans. I think the House is going to flip regardless, and I think that number sits somewhere between 30 and 50 uh, Democrats in the House of Representatives. All right, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today on this episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. Um, Keep in mind, tomorrow night I am going to be doing a live that will be Tuesday's podcast for the Analytical Iowan podcast. Um, so I want to keep that out there as an option. Um, so make sure you look for that. And then I will be back with an actual podcast like this. This will tomorrow, and then there'll be one like this on Wednesday. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.